Okay, since the introductory demo, I went through and put everything that is kidney in one folder, and you might have seen me clicking around. I was trying to do that before. This is the way it should be, and this is what, if you work in a team, you want to make sure that somebody who opens your file isn't completely overwhelmed with a bunch of ridiculous layers that don't need to be on different layers. So this is a folder which contains the kidney without the vessels, right? And this is the vessels, right? And these two folders, and you might use them independently. You might make an illustration about the kidney, about the vessels, and I just did that by lowering the opacity to 50%. Or you might, it might be more about the kidney than the vessels, and so you lower this by 50%, right? You could do the same thing by splitting the arteries out. This probably isn't gonna. You could lower the opacity of the arteries to make a story about the veins, or so on and so forth. All right, but we're not going to do that. That's not what this is about. What this is about, if I can stop undoing the undos. There we go. What we're going to talk about is we're going to turn off all these things, and we're just going to talk about the veins, for instance. This is just a layer style, and if you click on this little wheel on the little arrow over there and you turn off the effects, it's just black. It's just painting a black line that tapers. And so I have a nice little taper brush that I apparently lost somewhere. It was in here somewhere. B, Z, and this layer is locked. I'm going to unlock the layer. And now if I paint and I turn that layer style back on, it will automatically apply it anywhere I paint. Okay, and this is just a tapering brush. How do we make a brush taper? We come under Shape Dynamics and we tell it to taper. And what does that number mean? That number is how many steps the brush will move as it fades to 0. You could have the size jitter. You don't really want to do that with a vessel, but you could. And I'll show you another example of that. If we switch to a different brush, we pick this brush, go under Tip Shape, and you spread the spacing out, right? This is the spacing. So when we talk about making a brush fade, this is the number. Each dot is a number. It's the number of the time the brush hits the canvas. So if we set it to fade or to scale over, we would set it here to fade the size by 25 points. That means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So basically, by the time you got to 25, if we lower this number to 10, we would see that by 10 strokes it is faded to 0 in terms of its size. You could also have the fade not be on the shape, but you could have it be on the, let's see here, on the opacity, and the opacity could be over 10, right? So then it would fade over 10 steps of the brush there. But here, all we're doing is we're setting it to fade. We want the brush tip marks to be pretty close together, right? So it's not scalloped. We want it to be smooth. And then we want it to fade over, I think it's 200. I don't remember exactly, but you can experiment with this. And then it will fade out over nothing, okay? And all that to say, that these settings for the layer style, and apparently my layer style got turned off. Let's turn our layer style on by clicking the little eyeball there. The bevel and emboss is set to this. This little dot needs to be in the center. If it's off to the side, you won't get that nice highlight. It'll have that weird thing. So make sure it's in here. Color overlay is pretty simple. You just pick the color for something like this. There wouldn't be any satin on it. And it has a little drop shadow, and the drop shadow gives it some presence and makes it look like it's really sitting on that object. All right. Arteries are the same way. The neat thing is that, and you probably saw a bit of this in the demo, is that once I have it set up, I can say New Style, and I can save it, and it will save all these settings in here, right? And for a big team, what I would suggest is you go through and make an artery style and a vein style, and you share it using libraries. And you can do that here. And I think it's shared through, I don't work in a big team, so I don't know, but I'm assuming this is all shared through the Adobe.com app. So one thing I will say about this is that let's look at this artery or these arteries and the larger arteries here. So here, if we look at the layer style for the bevel and emboss, the size is 5 and the depth is 100%. If you look at the largest one for bevel and emboss, the size is 10. And that has to do with how far away this highlight is, right? Is we're trying to fake it. So it's moving 10 pixels in from the edge, or 4 pixels in from the edge, and here it's moving in even more, 13 pixels. There aren't 13 pixels of width here in these small ones, so that wouldn't work. So you basically need to do a layer style for each size as the vessel gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You don't need 1,000 of them, you need 2 or 3 of them. But I'll let you figure that out for yourself. It's pretty self-explanatory. One thing I will say is, and this one is a good example, is I'm using a layer mask to taper to get rid of these edges, because what's happening is there's an inner shadow on this. See this inner shadow? This inner shadow is making the vessel darker towards the edge. Well, that's great, except where it tapers, right? And then where it tapers too much, it's putting an inner shadow from both sides, and they're converging. Oh, look at that! I didn't realize that. Huh? You can, if you're on inner shadow, you can drag it. Huh? Never knew you could do that. Interesting. I'm useless, but interesting. Okay, so basically, what you need to do is you need to hide this, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to make it merge into the layers underneath it, and we don't want that. And so we have a layer mask, which is just a black and white layer. That's this little icon right here, and you paint gradations on it. And here I just painted them with a big brush or the gradient tool, and it fades them back, right? So I could do this. Hang on a second, let me click on the layer mask, fill it with white, get the gradient tool. The gradient tool is set foreground to transparent, which is great. I'm going to change it. I'm going to hit D and then hit X to get the default colors black and white. I'm going to click on the tip and drag this way. Okay, and that just fades it out. It puts a little black spot here. That's what the black spot looks like, and it fades it out. That's how layer masks work. Now, you may not see it right now, but it's important to note. Oh yeah, you can see it. Okay, so see that there's a difference if I turn this little toggle on and off under the layer style. What it's doing is it's saying the layer mask, you want to allow this layer mask to hide the layer style effect. That's what we want. We want this on. And the reason is that it's removing all of the effect and it's making the layer mask operate normally like it was just regular paint on a layer. And the important thing that it does is if you have stroke on, and I'm going to toggle stroke on right now. Let's imagine we had a stroke around here. See how this stroke comes all the way around, which is fine. We might want that in some cases. Look what happens when I turn off the layer mask effect. Because what it's doing is it's stroking every semi-transparent pixel. These are semi-transparent because of the layer mask. Here they become opaque. This is where the layer mask loses its effect. Right? The layer mask, the last pixel that the layer mask affects is right around in here somewhere. And so just remember that you have to have this clicked in some cases. All right. So what else can I tell you about layer styles? I think that's probably it. Let's see here. Yeah, let's go ahead and end this video and move on to the next video. So that's it for layer styles for small vessels.